Hey there, it's Jordan with Status Coup. Delighted to be joined by Kim Brown. She is the host of Burn It Down with Kim Brown on YouTube.
The Starbucks Workers Union on successfully organizing their 200th store this week. That is a BFD. That is a big, huge deal for the Starbucks workers and the Starbucks Workers Union. In spite of from corporate, it is coming from the top, from CEO Howard Schultz.
And excited, she'll also be guest hosting tomorrow on Status Coup and hopefully more regularly on Status Coup. Kim, before we get into the topic, tell us what Burn It Down with Kim Brown is all about, your background. Tell the people who you are.
Thanks, Jordan. I appreciate you having me here on Status Coup. How's everybody doing out there? Yep, I'm the host of Burn It Down with Kim Brown on YouTube. I have been in broadcasting, radio, television, web for over 20 years. I've probably interviewed your favorite rapper at some point in my life. But it is important to understand that, number one, everything in our lives are impacted by politics, especially if you are a person of color, especially if you are a Black person in America. Politics dominates all aspects of our lives. So it was important to me to stop broadcasting the mundane, the trite, the shit that doesn't really matter, the celebrity nonsense, and start talking to people about real issues, educating people about what we can do politically to better improve our collective condition. And I'm here for abolishing and burning down all the systems of oppression, everything that holds people back from being literally their best human selves. And that starts with capitalism, that continues on with burning down white supremacy, that continues with burning down the patriarchy and ableism, homophobia and transphobia, misogynoir, everything. So I'm here to dismantle all the things, Jordan. That is the goal of Burn It Down with Kim Brown.
I know that my audience is very, very excited to hear all that. Well, let's talk about one of those systems, the military-industrial complex. The news has been abuzz over Republicans blocking a bill to fund healthcare for veterans who were exposed to toxic burn pits. Frankly, let's be real, the media wouldn't give a shit unless Jon Stewart was screaming out loud. But I wanted your thoughts because why? I mean, we're paying what, $830 billion of a military budget. So why is there like separate funding needing? Why isn't it part of that? And B, doesn't this kind of expose that Republicans don't really particularly care that much about veterans?
Absolutely. I mean, Republicans, it's funny because they are the ones wearing the American flags, weaponizing patriotism, weaponizing our military. It's important for us to defeat them over there so they don't come attack us over here. But in the meantime, what the U.S. military is in fact doing is defeating its own troops from the inside by denying them these healthcare benefits and these expanded, assistance to try to help them deal with the poisoning, basically the cancers, the chronic illnesses that they have obtained through their military services abroad. But Jordan, as much as I would, and I think it is a valid point to break this down via Republicans and Democrats and see what their priorities are, I think this case, particularly with these veterans right now, is a perfect reason why we need to defund the military and even go as far as to abolish the military. Because I look at these veterans and from a humanist perspective, truly from a human perspective, I empathize with them. I feel for them. I can see that they're in pain. I can see that they are indeed struggling mightily and suffering with their physical illnesses. But there is something very astray. Well, number one, where we know that the U.S. military intentionally targets people as it relates to class. They are targeting poor whites. They are targeting poor Latinos, poor Blacks to have these bodies as fodder, basically, to go out into the world and do our imperialist missions that we do. And what really makes me feel sorry for these people is obviously the suffering that they're enduring. But where I don't feel sorry for them is that when has the U.S. military ever taken care of its veterans? After World War II, the GI Bill is something that was very touted as a signature piece of legislation in a bill, a law that she's about to call him Frederick Douglass, Franklin Roosevelt. He's definitely not Frederick Douglass, even though some people think he is. But Franklin Roosevelt, passed the GI Bill. But what a lot of Americans intentionally overlook is that Black soldiers were not eligible for the GI Bill. So all the wealth that was accumulated by World War II veterans, white World War II veterans, these same benefits were not available to Black veterans. And even if we go along into the Vietnam War, how many of the Vietnam veterans were affected by Agent Orange and other chemical poisonings? And Jordan, I don't know how old you are, but I'm assuming we're about the same age. But when homelessness and unhoused populations were swelling in the 80s during the Reagan era, it was majority U.S. veterans out on the streets, especially here in Washington, D.C., where I live close to. It was a majority veterans out there on the streets. So at some point, it is incumbent on individuals to take some personal responsibility. You got to stop signing up for an institution that doesn't give a shit about you once your body is all used up for its imperialist purpose. And when these folks currently who are protesting the Senate or 25 Senate Republicans changing their votes on the PACT Act, they talk about some of the things that they were forced to do. They were forced to participate in these burn pits where they were burning incendiaries and chemicals and human waste. And it's like, at some point, how can you pledge fealty to an institution that is intentionally putting you in harm's way? The warfare, the war zones notwithstanding, your literal grunt work as a soldier is exposing you to toxins and chemicals that can and will cause you cancer. So what I want for us, I want us to try to rethink the whole purpose of the military, what the military does, and especially relative to the way that they do not take care of veterans and for the amount of money that they literally suck up from the rest of us. I think now in 2022, while America is trying to expand its imperialist footprint in the global South, in Africa, and in Latin America, and as we see in Eastern Europe, in Ukraine and Poland, it's imperative that we collectively hold Democrats' feet to the fire here about pouring all of this money into the U.S. military, because they don't even take care of their people. And all of these missions across the world, so-called trying to restore democracy or bring democracy, we're all adults now. I think we've grown up past the Iraq war, past the war in Afghanistan. Democracy hasn't been restored anywhere. It's time to cut out the fantasy and defund the military post haste.
Well, we remember, I don't think either of us were alive, but JFK tried to at least defund the CIA. And, at the end of the day, you hit on it. Most of these folks that are 17, 18, 19, I mean, the military is like recruiting on Twitch and, Call of Duty players. And, they're going well beyond just like, targeting, going to high schools outside with their little pamphlets. But most of these people have no other opportunities. I mean, I just did an economic tour. Paul Krugman's waxing poetic. No, we're not in a recession. The term doesn't matter. Biden's putting out, we're in a historic recovery. I mean, if you go out there and talk to people, it's a historically terrible situation for most people. Poor Black people, poor Hispanic people, of course, Indigenous people, poor white people, frankly, formerly middle class people that are now like one catastrophe away from homelessness. Mm-hmm. So basically, they've created the conditions that, I don't want to say you're forced, but young people feel like they don't have any other options but to basically, hey, it'll give me great benefits and stability. And, hopefully they'll take care of me because I've been conditioned and brainwashed that, once a soldier, your country will take care of you. But obviously what you're talking about is this burn pits thing is just one of many situations. I mean, the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, they've been skimming on veterans' healthcare for years. So I'd love your thoughts basically on, what do those young people do when basically it's an economic Hunger Games out there?
No, I mean, you're not wrong. You're not wrong about that. I mean, I know a number of people who have joined the military at various points of their lives, obviously when younger people, but for that exact same reason, for some sort of economic mobility or having the stability of having that military check. I get that without a doubt. But see, that's the problem though. That is the quandary that American capitalism forces its young people into, because we will fund the military to the tunes of billions and billions of dollars. What we're not doing is funding public schools. What we aren't doing is funding our infrastructure to the level and the sustained levels, yearly levels, decades long levels that we have funded the military. That's the thing. All of our money, all of our capital, all of our treasure has gone into imperialism and neo-colonial missions around the world. We have disinvested in the United States. And the thing is, I hate, this is the truth though. You know what I'm saying? You look at Baltimore City, you look at certain parts of Philadelphia, you look at Chicago, you look at a lot of Black cities, and you see this historical disinvestment. But as white people know, poor whites, lower class whites, your shit is being disinvested too. You know what I'm saying? And the thing is, people of color, Black folks, have taken to the streets literally for decades, demanding parity in funding when it comes to public schools and making sure that children have at least the bare minimum, a good, decent education, accessibility to food, shelter, and clean water. And these are things that Black communities have been fighting for a long time. And I think that we have seen white people fight for this. And I think we're going to actually, what we need to see is more white people fighting for this, because anything that America and capitalism does to those lower in the social hierarchy, non-white people, non-men, non-straight, non-Christian, they are eventually going to do to those social hierarchy groups, to the ones who are at the top. They're testing it to see if those at the top are okay with these same things being executed against those at the bottom. And then eventually that same bad judgment and maltreatment will soon come to those upper groups. I mean, that's when I see, again, these veterans camping out on the steps of the U.S. Capitol. I feel for them, but it's like, what did you think happened to the Iraqi veterans? What did you think happened to the Vietnam veterans? Like there's no promises here. And if the best predictor of future behavior is looking at how a person or institution behaved in the past. And the US military has done just that. They have used up American bodies for the purposes of destroying other people's bodies way over there, to fuel the ends to a capitalist means in the long run, right? And that continues. So I think it's important that we try to make sure that from a philosophical perspective, that people are disinvested from the military, from the concept of the military, from even the concept of patriotism, because patriotism is imperialism. It's neocolonialism. When you look at it from the ways that America means patriotism, it means our country's God-given right, our manifest destiny to dominate others and submit them into our will. And if it's a get down or lay down situation, get down or be bombed into obscurity situation, America will do that. But the contradictions within the American ethos, the philosophy of how we operate, these notions of, personal responsibility or whatever. Well, our military service members don't have the option of personal responsibility while they're in there. Like, I wish that some of these victims of these burn pits could have disobeyed orders. I wish they could have said no. I wish they could have walked away. I wish they at least had the autonomy of some sorts to use their God-given common sense and saying, you know what, maybe we shouldn't be burning human feces. Maybe that will have a negative impact on our health. But the fact that there is such an institution that would put its own soldiers, its own members in that kind of danger, in these disasters that could have been avoided. This whole burn pit situation with these veterans is something that could have been avoided had we had people who actually cared about the veterans in positions of power in the first place. And that's not what we have.
And, the Democratic Party's answer to this would be, hey, Kim, we appointed the first Black defense secretary. Don't mind that he was a member of Raytheon's board. So, give us a break here. Okay. We checked the box.
No breaks will be given, Jordan. Sorry.
My last question on this, I am always kind of like just perplexed. You remember during the Democratic primary, I mean, for years, but let's go to 2020. I mean, you could play the drinking game out of how are we going to pay for it? How are we going to pay for it? How are we going to pay for it? Biden on the stage. How are we going to pay for Medicare for all? How are you going to pay for these things? Jesus Christ. I failed math in high school. I could do basic math that, all right, we got out of a war, got out of it. And yet the military budget went up. We were spending, I believe, like that big Washington Post story, like $300 million a day or something crazy like that in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
So all of this, I'm for, obviously, funding these veterans, but the actual military, Afghanistan, we're still partaking in Yemen and the slaughter there, Somalia. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. Syria. How is it that we got to focus on how we're going to pay for it and check every last decimal point if it's healthcare, education, climate, infrastructure? I have, Bernie kind of sort of brought this up in his campaign, but I haven't seen this message and confronting the Democratic Party elite, of course, the Republican Party elite, on you're full of shit. You have all the money to keep this military industrial complex, a gazillion bases all over the world. We got a nickel and dime for anything that actually helps working people.
On the issues of like abortion, okay, I can see where people are like, no, there are definitely clear differences between the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. But when it comes to militarism, when it comes to American imperialism, there's really not much difference. Joe Biden is as much an imperialist as George H.W. Bush, as his father and Nixon and all of them, like Obama. Biden, Clinton, how are they less imperialist than the Bushes and Trumps? They aren't. And we have to accept this. For people who vote left, I don't know how many Democrats you have watching your show, but for people who vote left, I mean, you have to really take the time and call a thing here. The Democrats are as invested in the military industrial complex as Republicans are. And that is a very hard truth, I think, that most liberals are going to have to accept here. Because as you said, Jordan, we have money for all the domestic things that we need, okay? We have money for nationalized health care. We have money for free community college. All the things that got stripped out of Build Back Better, we actually have the money for it, but we're just sending it to Raytheon, to Lockheed Martin, to BAE Systems. Like, this is where your money is going. This is where your children's future is being invested in making sure that American hegemony remains, has a fist grip on the rest of the globe. And to me, at a certain point, we have to grow up. We collectively, as a country, as citizens, have to grow up and tell our government no, that this is not the way that number one, we want to operate in the future. We are on top of that dealing with a climate catastrophe of which the U.S. military is largely responsible for. The burn pits are a perfect example of that. Just wantonly spreading contamination and pollutants and destroying land and destroying water sources in countries far, far away. And the thing is, America does that abroad and we do that here. So at what point are we as a nation going to stand up and say that this is enough? Like it is bad enough that America is over contributing with the destruction of the planet and the climate disintegrating, but we are also very much doing that here. Our government allows for water contamination, for soil, air contamination. They let it happen. So the sooner that we relinquish the grip that capitalism and lobbyists have on our elected officials, that is going to be the pathway to change. But just thinking that Democrats do it this way and the Republicans are wrong, it's like, no, that they are absolutely both heads of the same savage beast.
Absolutely. I'm excited. You're going to be hosting tomorrow, Wednesday, 5:00 Eastern. Tell people where they could go for your channel and other platforms you're on to support.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Jordan. Yeah, come hang out with me. Burn It Down with Kim Brown. Our show airs Tuesdays and Fridays, 7 p.m. Eastern. Tonight's show, I'm going to be talking about how is it that sexual predators continue to sexual predate. Speaking specifically about the rapper Mystical, who was arrested over the weekend, charged with rape again, and the Cleveland Browns quarterback Deshaun Watson, who was just recently suspended for several games to start the season after he settled with over 20 massage therapists for alleged sexual misconduct. And the angle that I'm taking there is that I'm very tired of the criminal justice system having to be the one to catch up with sexual predators. If we're going to defund the police and abolish the police and give community control over the police, I need for the community to get some control over these fucking rapists and abusers and domestic people who commit domestic violence and get a hold of that. So we're going to be talking about that in addition to some labor actions. The railroad workers strike is potentially still looming for September. And here locally where I live in Prince George's County, Maryland, the Amalgamated Transit Union, Local 689, is on strike. These are the Metro Access drivers, the people that drive our disabled neighbors around to doctor's appointments and adult daycare. These people are on strike because TransDev, the company that oversees that contract from WMATA, from Metro here in DC, will not pay these people a living wage. So we're going to explore all of that tonight on Burn It Down with Kim Brown. And you can also catch me on Black Power Media on YouTube, where I am one of the co-hosts of the Remix Morning Show, which airs 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday Eastern.
So there's good news and there's bad news. The bad news, you're competing with me technically tonight because I'm going to be live. I'm going to be live from Philly around 7 o'clock. But, you know, people should support your channel. Definitely watch. Maybe you could have us both on. I'm usually not live at 7 o'clock, but we're going to be live in Philly covering developments in this apartment complex that low-income Black folks that are being forced out by a greedy real estate developer. A judge has ordered the protesters that have pitched tents on the property to leave. So have us both on. The good news, that's kind of why I was attracted to having you on, because you're one of the few that I've seen that's actually interviewing activists, real people, not just pontificating. So definitely on your channel, you speak with workers and, activists. So that's kind of the sweet spot for Status Coup too. So definitely excited. And you can check Kim out tomorrow, 5 o'clock Eastern, and definitely go subscribe to Burn It Down with Kim Brown.
And I appreciate you focusing on the work that you do as well. I mean, because what you are about to go cover in Philly is something that is actually happening not right here, but today in Los Angeles. The Los Angeles City Council is set to vote on an amendment that would expand the number of zones in which unhoused people are no longer permitted. And this is a national trend without being like federal law. You understand what I'm saying? Like, it seems from city to city that every local government is cracking down on unhoused people where they can be and not addressing the problem. This while boasting about record budget surpluses in their cities and respective states, but they want to criminalize the homeless even further. It's disgusting.
Absolutely. So everyone go subscribe. Looking forward to having you on tomorrow. Kim Brown, thanks for taking the time.
Thanks, Jordan. Appreciate it.
Yep. Thanks for watching, and make sure to tune in to Status Coup's daily live stream Monday through Thursday at 5 o'clock Eastern time and Fridays at 4 o'clock Eastern time.